As an artist collaboration, we've given shape and depth to some of the most complicated topics of our time, making them easily accessible for those who seek to understand. We've given voice and space to the stories that often go ignored. Please take a moment to consider being a patron, make a donation, or join Rockfin. Thank you. Well, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Pullquote.
Welcome to Pullquote.
This is the second season, and we are welcoming our new guests. Today, we have a very important guest that we've been wanting to talk to
for quite a while.
Yes. Since this past summer of 2021. Our guest today is Ragnar Bohlin. He's from the San Francisco Symphony. He was until pretty recently the San Francisco Symphony Chorus director. Mr. Bohlin started working with the San Francisco Symphony Chorus in 2007. In this role, he's prepared the chorus for some of the world's greatest conductors, such as Michael Tilson Thomas, or MTT, Herbert Blomstedt, who used to be the San Francisco director, Charles Dutoit, Esa-Pekka Salonen, and Alan Gilbert. His outstanding work has been recognized with a Grammy Award for Best Choral Performance for Mahler's Symphony 8 with Michael Tilson Thomas and the San Francisco Symphony. In 2014, Ragnar Bohlin founded the professional chamber choir Capella SF. With them, he has recorded 4 CDs, Light of Gold, Facing West, choral music of Conrad Sousa and David Conti, Timeless, and Mass Transmission, music by Mason Bates. Before his appointment in San Francisco, he was choir master of Stockholm's Maria Magdalena Church and Stockholm Philharmonic Choir, and appeared regularly on Swedish radio with Maria Magdalena Motet Choir and the Maria Vocal Ensemble. Ragnar Bohlin caught our attention in August 2021, when he stepped down as director of the San Francisco Symphony Chorus because of the vaccine mandate policies instituted by both the company and the city of San Francisco. In his statement, he said, "I have, with a growing sense of alarm, observed the tide turn in this direction. In regards to medical passports, I am sad to now see that SFS comply with these dictates and to deprive their employees their basic rights of privacy, bodily autonomy, and informed consent." David Eric Peterson, who worked with Bohlin for 7 years in the Symphony Chorus and for 3 years with Capella SF, said of Bohlin, "He taught me how to listen to people singing together better, the intricacies and really small differences that make all the difference." Welcome to Pullquote, Ragnar Bohlin.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much.
How are you?
Thank you for
joining
agreeing
us.
to meet with us.
That last quote by David Eric Peterson, when I first read it, choked me up and just about choked me up again. To have that kind of accolade, to describe somebody who they work with that has that effect on them is really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to your artistry as well as, your ability to work with people and bring them together. And in a little while, we're going to show some of your work to our audience so they can see. And watching that video as well, also, really brought up a lot of emotion for me. I was like, watching you work with the chorus was really incredible. I loved that the video showed you as well, because usually we're sitting behind you.
Right.
And we don't see you.
Right. We only see the performers. So
that's a nice thing with being a conductor. You can forget about the audience and you just communicate with your choir singers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm sure that helps, that intimacy. You don't have to deal with, like, they see the audience, but they also see you, and you can focus then on just them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Nice little setup you've got there. It looks very cozy.
Yep.
Yeah.
My place is going.
And you're living in Sweden now?
Yes, so I've been in Sweden since the start of the pandemic, March 20.
Okay.
I was actually in the middle of a tour with Seraphic Fire in Florida, early March 20. And when the pandemic was announced, we had 2 out of 5 concerts. And after some back and forth, we decided to cancel the rest of the 3 concerts. And instead of going back to San Francisco, as was originally planned, I instead found a flight back to Stockholm, to Sweden, because it was just announced that the symphony was postponing all performances for at least a month. So that's what went on. Spring of 20, the symphony kept postponing month after month, hoping that it would clear. Initially, it was only 2 or 3 weeks to flatten the curve, if you remember. So we were all hopeful. So I've been here ever since. And I kept working online with the chorus. We immediately went online, started Zoom rehearsals, weekly Zoom rehearsals with the symphony chorus to just keep in shape and keep in touch. Then when it became clear that we still couldn't have any activities in the fall of 20, we started doing streamed productions. And some of them were recorded just individually from people's homes. I rehearsed everybody from here, from Sweden. And then everybody recorded at their homes, and it was sort of mixed together. Eventually, when people were let into the symphony hall, I think in the beginning it was one singer at a time who could go in and record in a room. But I prepared them from here. My presence was still not required over in San Francisco because there was no conducting a group. It was just preparing them, and then they went in and sang to a click track with earphones and a pitch. Artistically challenging and frustrating at the same time. We learned a lot during that time.
Wow.
That's pretty incredible. Go on.
Yeah, I just, I think that as much as I know that the whole experience of trying to recreate the music online was something that people were doing so that they could stay together and they could continue this mantra, hey, we're all in this together. But really, there just is nothing to replace the actual organic experience of being together physically, side by side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't try to bottle that and put it, through a Zoom system, and it just loses its value.
Well, you don't have that experience of being next to somebody,
right?
We exchange energy with each other no matter what,
right,
when we're in the same room together.
But at the same time, I could see people were trying to make do with what they had.
Yeah,
so
it spurred a lot of created a lot of what is the word? A lot of people came up with brilliant ideas on how to survive lockdown.
Good.
And a lot of creativity. But then again, as I said, it was artistically very frustrating because, of course, to some extent, you can bottle up the concert experience and watch a group, a choir or an orchestra or a group of players on television or on video. But if not even the musicians are together in the same room, that's when you really lose some vital aspects of music making, especially when it comes to choir singing.
Right.
As David Eric Peterson, in his kind remark there in the beginning, indicated, it's about listening. It's about feeling in the air once each other's energies. It's the connection between conductor and group of singers, but it's also the connection from each singer to each other to, you know, intuitively know what the guy behind you or
Right.
beside you is going to do at whatever moment, and then quickly adjust to whatever intonation issues or timing issues that may occur. And when you can do that, when you sit in a booth and you sing to a click track, you lose so much nuance and refinement.
Right.
Agreed.
Well, you know, that sounds more like the production values of like pop music recording, you know,
Right.
rather than like, you know, where you don't necessarily have to be in the same room, but it helps. But in that case, it's, you know, because it's a little different in its formulation. You can get away with that more. But in this case, I just can't imagine that. I mean, that's putting a lot of trust in the mix board.
Yeah.
Right. Should we talk about the experience of what led up to leaving?
Let's first look at that video that we
that's
talked
a good
about.
idea.
So this is Ragnar. Oh man, I'm so sorry, Ragnar Bohlin with the sorry, not Capella SF.
You just had it.
I just had it a moment ago.
The Formosa singers.
The Formosa singers.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, wow.
Okay.
Senior moment. Okay, well, let's play that and let's roll.
Yeah.
Wow, that is just amazing.
Took my breath away. Wow.
That was the Formosa Singers. They're based in Taiwan, and that piece was called Sirens 5 from the Book of Matthew by Mason Bates. So you worked with Mason Bates. You worked. Was that part of the mass transmission?
Right. So we made a CD that we labeled Mass Transmission after his other choral piece that we recorded as well.
Okay.
Transmission, written for organ and choir. Book of Matthew is from Sirens, a 30-minute long piece in 6 movements, and with different things that calls and beckon us in life. And this was the one biblical piece that he had. Jesus calling his disciples, throw your nets away and follow me, and you will
be fishers of men.
Exactly that.
Yeah. Wow, that was lovely, and I love that you were working with a lot of like contemporary music, especially in Capella SF. Was that something that was that you set out to do in founding that group?
Not really. Personally, I've always been a musical omnivore, and I think we need to guard our heritage, the great masters of the past, the Bach motets, the Monteverdi madrigals, Brahms motets, all of that, as well as peeking into the future and making commissions. And I've always had this way of thinking that the best music has yet to be written. And I firmly believe that. And I've always been curious to work with composers and commission music. But I love everything from Hildegard from Bingen all the way up to contemporary.
That's interesting. It's funny. I tended to go with like the early music and the contemporary music, and not a lot in between. But I'm familiar, of course, and would go see music from other periods. But those were the two I gravitated towards. It's kind of funny. I would often go see the Bach the American Bach soloists in San Francisco. Yeah. Always had always enjoyed that.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a question about his work with Capella, or did you want to move on?
Let's move on, and
we can come back. Yeah,
that'll
we'll come back
up when we talk about what happened. You want to?
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about this in the intro. Leaving the SF Symphony Choir. You established. You started there in 2007. That's quite a long run. First of all, before we talk about you leaving, let's talk about you joining. So, what brought you to San Francisco and the Symphony Chorus? And was it Michael Tilson Thomas Michael? MTT Thomas.
Thomas.
That you first started working with? Did he bring you in, or how did that work?
Well, that's a story in and of itself. So I'd been for 12 years at Maria Magdalena Church in Stockholm, a very fine position for a person like me, sort of focused on choir conducting. I'm trained as an organist, church musician, so choir conducting, playing, piano, organ, the whole spectrum. But this particular job in Maria Magdalena was a choir master position, where I had a budget to perform oratorio works 3 to 4 times per year, Verdi Requiem, Brahms Requiem, the St. Matthew Passion by Bach, and so on and so forth, and a lot of a cappella music, as well as doing a lot of freelance work. I was a guest conductor with the Swedish Radio Choir and lots of other choirs at the time. So I'd been there for quite some time when one of my former singers from Stockholm, a Swede who had moved over to San Francisco a few years earlier and started singing with the San Francisco Symphony Chorus, she called me up and notified me that, hey, the position is vacant as chorus director. Maybe it's something for you. And, I wasn't looking for anything, but then I started scratching my head. This is interesting. Maybe it is time for a change of scenes, because I knew of the San Francisco Symphony Chorus from 10 years prior to that, or a bit more. I had a scholarship from the Sweden America Foundation to travel the US from the East Coast to the West Coast, observing a lot of the best choirs in the US, the Dale Warland Singers, and the best choirs, the Metropolitan Opera Chorus, the LA Master Chorale. And I ended up in San Francisco and visited Chanticleer and the Symphony Chorus.
Oh, cool.
So I knew about the chorus, and I looked at the job description, and it was preparing choruses for conductors, of course, but also being on the podium oneself, which was sort of a deal breaker for me. When I saw that was on the slate, then okay, let's see where this goes. So I threw in an application, and I was called to do an audition, and eventually I was offered the position. And that was a terrific chance, and it's been a wonderful 14 years filled with so many incredible musical experiences. For a year, I commuted back and forth to Stockholm. My wife is a cellist with the Royal Opera in Stockholm, And then she and the boys joined me in San Francisco, and we had 3 years together. We lived in Berkeley, actually.
Okay.
Until she decided, or we all decided, that it's better that she go back instead of becoming a freelance musician. And she still had her job in Stockholm, but she couldn't keep it open for any longer. So, but by that time, the boys were already teenagers, so my commuting was sort of doable.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was 2011. So from 2011 through 2020, I was commuting and also doing a lot of freelance stuff as the Formosa singers that you just played there. I was traveling
Right.
to them, to Sao Paulo and in Brazil, and to Canada, and some guest conducting in Sweden and Norway. So it's been a fantastic 14 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Did you live in Berkeley the whole time?
No, only until the family moved back to. So 2011, I moved into San Francisco. I used to live on Octavia Street, just 2 blocks away from the Symphony.
Wow, I used to live on Octavia Street, almost 2 blocks from the Symphony. Yeah, Octavia and Fulton.
Oh, wow. Octavia and Hayes for me. That's
okay.
So
Well, so yeah.
Wow.
When I lived there, it was the Hood.
Right. Wow.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, we just to give you some reference, we lived in Alamo Square when we left. So we that's where we lived.
Yeah. So just up the hill from where you were. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Hayes. So we were on the 21 Hayes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure. Well, do you miss it? I mean,
Obviously.
I mean.
Yeah, no, I miss it. It came to such an abrupt and premature ending. So I did not feel ready to leave, but circumstances forced me to, from my point of view. And so, yes, I do miss it tremendously.
Yeah. Yeah. We go through cycles of missing it and being glad that we're no longer there.
Yeah. Yeah. We miss it, but then we realize if we were still there, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We wouldn't be able to go to the symphony. We wouldn't be able to go to see a concert. Like, we wouldn't be able to do anything because we don't, and this is where I think
this is a good transition.
Good transition into why you ended up leaving and the circumstances around that. I know that there's been a lot of communication with me from some of our friends in San Francisco that are really curious about your story. They want to get a better context about the situation.
Right. So let's see. Thinking back, San Francisco started their mandates for the passports like around June, July. I can't remember exactly. Do you remember?
San Francisco Symphony started mid-August.
Okay.
That's when I left. The opera started already in July of 20. Wait a minute. Am I mixing it up? 21.
21. Yeah, it was 21.
Wow.
So the symphony held out a little bit longer.
Right. By then, the city had initiated that as a citywide thing, I think, with mostly like restaurants and bars and concerts and things. I don't think that some of the clubs even had opened at that point yet.
Right.
But they were initiating the mandate of vaccine. Show us your papers. You said in a conversation we had prior to this conversation, you mentioned that you saw that coming before you finally stepped down. What was it? Well, let's just talk about your feelings around this and maybe tell us your story about this.
Yeah. Well, where to start? I think I'll go back quite a bit to. I was on the airport in Arlanda in Stockholm 2008. I was on my way to San Francisco commuting, and I saw this Klein's The Shock Doctrine. I don't know if you're aware of it.
Yes.
Yeah, we were aware of it.
We're very aware of Naomi Klein. She's also a San Franciscan.
Oh,
So,
she
I'm
is.
sorry.
Where-
I'm sorry, not Naomi Klein. Naomi Wolf.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh,
So sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
Naomi-
well aware of Naomi Wolf as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I was
Yeah.
not them. But Naomi Klein, that book was written about, talked about, and I thought, interesting. I'll grab that. So I plowed my way through that book, and that kind of shattered my previous complete trust in what we can label mainstream media or corporate media, because as you know, the shock doctrine focuses a lot about the Middle East, the invasion of Iraq, but also regime change wars in South America, the coup in Chile, Pinochet, and all of that, and gave a completely different picture than what I had gotten before from history books and from media. So that was kind of jaw-dropping. And at the same time, the internet emerged with a lot of online content. So of course, that piqued my curiosity to search out more and more and more. So still sort of keeping abreast with official media, I also look to other sources to get a more complete picture. So with that, I can say that already when the pandemic broke out, there were other voices out there that had an opinion about what was going on. So therefore, I kind of knew, maybe not a year, but almost a year in advance of the announcement of the San Francisco Symphony vaccine mandate, that it was going to come to that. At least I saw that it was a major risk that it would come to that.
Really?
So I was preparing mentally for the pandemic year, from March 20 through spring of 21, when we were anyway just doing online content and streamed productions. And thankfully, my quote unquote, thankfully, my presence was not required at the symphony because we couldn't rehearse together. We just rehearsed online, and then the singers got in and recorded at the symphony one by one, or they recorded from home. So by the summer of 21, that's when things started to open up. And that's when we started to talk about, okay, what are the plans now for the fall? We're going to do Beethoven 9, and we're going to do Messiah. I was going to conduct the Messiah as I do every other year. Mm-hmm. So we made all those plans, but in my the back of my head, I knew that this might not happen because there may well be a vaccine mandate. And as it so happened, in mid-August, when I was actually just about to write a new contract, I had been offered a renewal of my contract. I think it was the fourth renewal of my contract, and I had postponed my answer a little bit in anticipation of what was to come. So right when that time was to sign that new contract, the announcement came that the symphony now requires vaccination, and that's when I said that I can't accept under those conditions, and here we are. That's
wow. Yeah, you know, we heard about it. Was it through Facebook or through just like news that was popping up, Twitter?
The news.
Yeah.
And then people we are still connected to in San Francisco were starting to post a lot about it.
About your resignation.
Right.
And
we were sort of led, you know, I mentioned this earlier, we were sort of led to believe that it was this idea where you're in the middle of conducting and you know, storm out of the room and say, I quit, you know, when it wasn't exactly like that. Like you were already in Sweden negotiating a new contract. And tell us what they said to you when how they would present it when you decided not to renew the contract.
Well, I understood it as if the symphony didn't have much leeway, that they had to follow this agenda, if you will, or mandate from above. And so I had a really nice conversation with my two planning managers, and they were very understanding. And I of course, understood their situation as well. So I was then asked if, is it okay that we announce your departure, the reason for your departure as being the vaccine mandate? And I said yes to this, because of course it could have been so easy to just say that after 14 years, wonderful years, now it's time to seek out new.
Right.
Yeah.
right, exactly. Spend time with the family, and
Right. And
right, like they always say about
Yeah.
the regular reasons. But I felt it as an opportunity, and in a way my duty to make a case for what I regard as, to put it bluntly, medical tyranny, that the deprival of bodily autonomy, and to make medical decisions for oneself. And had it been different, had it been a medication that had been fully approved with long-term studies and not, I think we're still in phase 3 of the trials, then the situation would have been different. But now that it was an experimental medication, and a new form of medication that had not been previously approved for large populations, the mRNA technique, as far as the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, and the DNA/vector vaccines, which is the J&J and the AstraZeneca. They're both new technologies, experimental, and there are thousands of whistleblowing scientists out there that I did lend my ear. So I was sort of kept abreast of what they were saying, and I just did not want. I don't think it's right to be forced into a medical experiment, because that is what it is. And we do have the Nuremberg Code and the Helsinki Declaration and lots of other laws to protect us from just that.
Right.
So I was pretty clear on my stance from that. As I told you, I saw it coming almost a year ahead, that it was going that direction.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of us were prepared for this moment. Some people, I think, were in denial.
It'll never. They won't go that far.
They're not going to go that far.
Yeah,
they're not going to.
They will. Yeah, and they did.
And I think they'll take it even farther too. And I think that, one of the ways that we can keep it from getting worse is to do exactly what you did, is to remove yourself from these types of what I like to call, it's sort of an upgraded segregation. It's a bifurcation of society. Haven't we been here before? Why are we doing this again?
Right. Yeah.
If people want to choose to put something into their body, that's their choice. But we should also have the choice not to.
And not be punished for doing that choice. Right? For that choice.
Right.
And I love how, liberal San Francisco were all behind my body, my choice when it came to another medical procedure. Right. But when it came to this one, we're all in this together. And, so I will wear a sling to prevent you from breaking your arm, and you will wear a sling to prevent me from breaking my arm.
Silly.
Your stance.
Well, if I may fill in, my stance would probably have been different if we were faced with a Black Death, or even Ebola, with whatever that is, 40% infection fatality ratio or something like that. But COVID-19 has been nowhere near that infection fatality ratio. But had it been, and then we're faced with a miracle drug that turns out to be very safe and super effective, then I would maybe have come to another stance. But these new experimental vaccines don't seem to be either safe nor effective.
Right.
Well,
to say the least.
We saw, I think what went on early on with all this, in the year before the vaccine passport and mandates, we saw the masking mandates, and
Right.
we both felt that the mask was the, the gateway drug, as it were, the means of getting people used to the idea of, you have to do this because everybody else is doing it, because the virus.
Right.
And and that it was the training ground for, or the training device for a number of things. We still feel like it's a slave device, but that it was the training device for getting people used to the idea that we're going to have to do something, and we're all going to have to do it in order to maintain our our well-being as a community and as a society. And we were very much opposed to that. We stopped going places that required it.
Right.
There were grocery stores nearby that were requiring it, and we're like, okay, well, you don't get our business any longer.
Yeah, we're just going to remove ourselves from
that. A major part of my stance when I left the symphony was partly the sort of forced medication aspect of it. The other, just a strong part, was the passport system, the medical passport system that can so easily be misused. And you mentioned Naomi Wolf, right? Did you have her on your show?
No, not yet. She's creating her own platform, and
well,
we may,
really out there.
Yeah, I mean, we communicate with her through Twitter, but yeah, we haven't really approached her about talking here on this program.
Yeah.
Well, she's one of many, of course, but she does wonderful presentations of the risk of this passport system that can so easily be, by a flick of a switch, be turned into China's social credit score system. And to not see that this system can be misused is very naive. And also, it's been planned for years. I think I've spent between 2,000 and 3,000 hours since the pandemic broke out to look into every aspect of the pandemic. The masks, the science around masks, the science around the vaccines, the science around lockdowns. They're not efficient. For example, Sweden, as you know, was infamous in the beginning for keeping quite open. Yeah. But yet we end up being number 9, I just read, in Europe, with the least number of deaths, total deaths of Europe.
I wonder why that is.
So my stance against that passport system was just as strong, because that's going to be such a nail in the coffin for a lot of our freedoms as human beings in society. And who are we handing the control over to?
Right.
These are anonymous IT entities that we have no control over.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that, you mentioned social credit system. I think that, a lot of this is going to move into actual credit and debt as a means of making money, financializing all of us. Debt is going to be one of those industries that we will all be used for making money from. What was the point I was going to make about that? We're already seeing that debt is being tied to identity,
right,
and vice versa. And it's a really strange thing to where, you and credit too. Like, if you don't have credit, you're really not considered, somebody who can engage in the world. Like, if you want to go out and buy a house and get a mortgage and you don't have any established credit, sorry, folks, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when we visited Stockholm about 3 years ago, and there were big posters up on the in the train stations and bus shelters, and they were in Swedish, so I translated them, and they were about personal debt. They were putting out personal debt loans, right. and advertising that, and they were aiming at a young audience.
Right.
I feel that not only are we going to be judged socially, but also, financially as well. And it's all tied together.
Yeah. It is. Speaking of Stockholm, what is life like there? I hear conflicting stories. I hear that it's just as bad as San Francisco. I hear that it's not. So tell us what's going on.
Well, I'm perhaps not completely updated with San Francisco. It depends on what you regard as bad as well. But in the beginning of the pandemic, Sweden kept quite open. We had very mild restrictions, and it was written about internationally. And a lot of people pointed finger to Sweden that this is going to end with a catastrophe, but it didn't. We did have a curve of deaths in April and May of, or was it March and April of 20? But the mean age was of the COVID deaths was 84 years old, and in many countries that's the mean age. It's above 80,
Right.
and we were not alone in having a lot of care home deaths. That seems to have been an international thing as well. Treatments that did not work and that people passed away from the treatments given in Sweden. A lot of people were put on palliative care, and it could be a doctor from telephone, from a description from a nurse in a care home. Mrs. So-and-so has these symptoms. Well, she's not going to make it. Put her on palliative care. And that's not the way to handle sick people. And then people were given morphine. I know in the US, a lot of people got, what was the drug? Remdesivir, that turned out to be rather harmful, which could lead to fluid in the lungs, things like that. And to put people on ventilators as opposed to just putting them on oxygen, which was later the norm. Stuff like that created for a curve of deaths in the beginning of the pandemic. But since then, it flattened out in Sweden. And so while fall of 20, when I Skyped with my, or had Zoom rehearsals with San Francisco singers, I was aghast to see how they were forced to wear masks and could not do anything while life went on pretty normal in Sweden at the same time.
Okay, good.
Yeah. We saw a video of some of the symphony performers out in the street on Octavia Street, which you mentioned a moment ago. And they were out, they had like closed off the streets and they were performing in the streets, with people around, but everybody was masked up. And I'm like, how are they doing this? How are they doing something physical, like playing, musical instruments with the masks on? And it looked so absurd. It broke my heart, actually.
That's absurd. And as I mentioned, I looked into all the science around masks, and we can at least conclude that science is not settled around that issue. It was pretty much settled before the pandemic, but then was it from May 20, suddenly there popped up new studies that proved what was already disproved in the past, that masks do not help against airborne infections. And also that they're harmful because you get hypoxia, you get too little oxygen and too much carbon dioxide. Plus, these masks I have a study that talks about masks that are being used today contain nanoparticles of plastic that we breathe in, that get into our system.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's just...
It's creepy.
It is creepy.
And then you can look at the broader picture and compare countries with strict lockdowns like Belgium, Spain, the UK, and some states in the US. They had the same mortality or higher than countries or states with mild restrictions and mild lockdowns. And as in Sweden, we didn't have mask mandates, and we ended up faring much better than Belgium, for example, and Switzerland. So anyway, where were we in our conversation?
So what's going on in Stockholm now?
So right now, though, suddenly we all thought that, well, maybe it's coming to an end now. At least in Sweden, in the fall of 21, we had what is the opposite of excess death? When you have lower than expected mortality.
Okay.
Yeah,
we had lower than expected mortality since February of 21. So since and still, our media is the same as yours. It talks about the pandemic. It talks about how bad everything is and the fear of the fifth wave or whatever. But at the same time, we have less people dying than a normal year in the middle of a pandemic. What is the problem then if less people than expected are dying? Is that our problem or what? So anyway, in the middle of the fall, we did have some restrictions in regards to, it was actually the music business that was hit. Restaurants and music was hit with some restrictions.
That seems to be the case all over. Everywhere.
Right. So we did get that eventually. But by, I think it was early October 21, that the government just took away all restrictions. So choir singing went back to complete normal. There was choir singing going on, but on a very small scale during the pandemic year. But from October 21, everybody just got back to normal. It was really as it was before. There was no distancing. We never had masks. I mean, a small percentage. If you go to a Stockholm Metro, you'll see around 10 to 20% maybe with masks at most.
Mm-hmm.
So things got back to normal, and yet they were kind of flagging, we'll see how this goes, and boom, out of the blue, vaccine passports. And this was after it came, they talked about it, they introduced the idea in September 21 as a potential means to deal with a pandemic. But meanwhile, things got back to normal, and things were normal. And then out of the blue, we got a sort of shock and awe treatment and introduction of these passports, because suddenly, I think it was end of November, they introduced the passport system as an option for arrangers and stores. So it's still an option, but it's being adopted. And right now there's a big fight going on between people like I who try to resist this trend and the push to introduce it. And as we talked about before, these passports, this medical passport system has been planned for years. I have documents saved with EU talking about vaccine passports from 2017, the WHO already from 2015. So it's been a long planned agenda, and now COVID-19 is being used as the excuse to introduce these long planned medical passports.
Wow. Okay.
So so we weren't sure what was going on. So I'm glad you brought us up to date, because we hadn't
cleared the air there.
Yeah, we hadn't heard that was a possibility. It sounds like what they are doing, the government is doing with the passports, we've been seeing with other things in like the United States and in specific states, like say Florida, which did not have as many restrictions, but they allow, say, companies or cities individually to do whatever they want to do, right? And so you'll have corporate entities, like chain grocery stores or whatever the case may be. They will enact whatever policies, rules that they want to, and the government's like, well, we're not saying they can't do that. So they kick the can down the road, even though they'll make it. It's sort of like the governor of Florida, who's like, we all know he's going to run for president, so he's all making a stand about freedoms and autonomy and all and whatever, right? And yet he'll still allow the cities to do what they're going to do, and so the more liberal cities will be more fascist in their approach, as opposed to other places in the same state. We've experienced the same thing here in Pennsylvania, where companies would be able to do whatever they wanted to, and the governor was like, "Oh, I'm just saying they can do what they want to. They don't have to follow these rules. These are not but they do anyway." And it's just it's a nudging.
It's really regional too. So is it the same in Stockholm, like
or in Sweden in general?
Or in Sweden in general? So like, for instance, you mentioned, I would like to talk about like what you're doing for a living now in your area. And then we can talk about, is what you're doing for a living requiring you to have a vaccine passport?
Thankfully not. Yes, some things are regional, and it seems like that's a strategy that has been employed in many countries, that they regionalize all the decisions. Look, they're doing it slightly different here, and they're doing it slightly different there, but it's the same agenda in the end. It just seems as if it's, they have autonomy, our democracy is working so wonderfully, but I'm doubtful. So some parts of when it comes to not so much restrictions, they're more national, but when it comes to the way hospitals deal with aspects of the situation. Anyways, right now, since early December, new mandates were put out from the government, and I think they changed it just before Christmas. They tightened the screw a notch because of the Omicron variant and the new surge in cases.
Cases.
Yeah.
It's all about cases.
Yeah. And anyway, I think everybody's confused with these new mandates. Nobody can. The rules are so complicated that everybody's just asking, what are the rules really? I think it's up to 500 in a public, what do you call it? Public event. You can, if you're no more than 500, you can either have a passport less without vaccine passports, but then you have to have 1 meter between groups of 8. And these groups, yeah, it's groups of 8 that know each other, up to 8, and then 3 feet to the next group. I mean, how do you even check? Do these people know
Right?
or not? The implications of the system is
Wow.
This is absurd.
complex. So you can do that, and then whatever you can, up to 500. So that requires you to have a certain size of hall to be able to do that. Let's say that you have a hall for perhaps 700 or 800, then you can fit in 500 without a vaccine passport.
Well, now that's every other month, right?
And there's a full moon, and
Exactly.
so or you can have a vaccine passport event, and then you don't need to have that 3 feet distance between groups of 8.
Got it.
If it's above, right before Christmas, they made it impossible to, if you're above 500, then it has to be a vaccine event, and you have to have distance between groups of 8 plus vaccine passport if you're more than 500.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So yeah, people are still trying to. The good thing is that, speaking of my new job, we rarely come to those sizes in my small churches here. So what happened when I resigned, I as I told you, I kind of knew where it was going way in advance. So I was looking out for church positions here, since I'm trained as an organist and a church musician. And what popped up was this job in Glimåkra congregation. It's 3 cute churches in the countryside, just a half hour from our beloved country house where I'm situated right now, by a lake and with a sauna and all that. And then there's something that I'm thinking that maybe down the line, maybe one day I'll take a job in a small church on the countryside and enjoy that kind of life, rural life. And it happened a bit prematurely, because I was indeed looking forward to be collaborating with Esa-Pekka Salonen that I knew from Sweden. And so it was all cut short, but considering the circumstances, I'm quite content and happy here. It's a small church choir I have, and it's one medieval church from the 1200s, one modern from the 40s, and one from the 19th century. That's the bigger church.
Wow, that's amazing.
Wow.
That's amazing. I love that.
Organ playing again, enjoy sitting with Bach and the French organ music, Widor and Vierne, and contemporary organ music, Messiaen, stuff like that. So I've been missing playing organ, so that's great. And I'm also freelancing a little bit. I took on the oratorio choir of the Maria Church in Helsingborg. It's 2 hours from here on the west coast, just north of Malmö. It's Buxtehude's old church. You're familiar with old music, you said?
Yeah.
So Buxtehude, Dietrich Buxtehude, the predecessor of Bach, as it were, or one of Bach's. There's a story of Bach walking by foot from Lübeck, I think it was, all the way to Helsingør in Denmark, where Buxtehude was the organist. Helsingør in Denmark and Helsingborg just across the water in Sweden. It was all Denmark, and he was in both those places to learn from the master. Bach was only 19 or 20, and Buxtehude was well established, and then of course Bach became Bach after that. There's a wonderful story written by Stefan Zweig about their meeting, and the sort of a fantasy of what their conversation could have been about when they played for each other on the balcony up at the organ in in Buxtehude's church. Wonderful little story about the essence of music and the essence of God and nature and all of that. Anyway,
I love stories like that. Yeah,
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
so I travel in there, and I've done 2 concerts already, and I'm aiming for a premiere of a new St. Matthew Passion by my friend and prolific composer Frederick Sixten. Quite elaborate new St. Matthew Passion with orchestra, soloists, and choir, 3rd of April. Depending on how things go, of course.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I hope that you're able to pull that off.
Yeah.
We were in Stockholm on Easter.
Yeah.
We
on
so
Easter
you know
Sunday.
we were able to get some of that feeling of being there at that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did wander into a couple churches here and there. We couldn't tell you the names.
Don't remember
but,
the name.
yeah.
Sorry.
But it was lovely, visiting everything that we, from art museums to the churches to, everything. So
yeah, we really liked it. Lovely.
you mentioned Esa-Pekka Salonen a couple times now, and I did too, in my introduction. Now, they are a composer that you've worked with, or are they from Sweden, or
Tell us.
tell us, kind
I'm
sir.
sorry, what was the question again?
So who is Esa-Pekka Salonen, and where do they live?
Where does he live?
Yeah, where does he live?
He lives in San Francisco now, I believe, but I think he commutes to Finland as well. He's from Finland.
Oh, okay.
He's a Finnish Swede. As you may know, Finland was part of Sweden from the 1200s when the nations formed, and it was stolen from us by the Russians, 1809, and then they became autonomous at the time of the Russian Revolution in 1917. So we have strong connections, Sweden and Finland, and there is a Swedish-speaking population there, and Esa-Pekka is a Swedish Finn.
Okay.
There are Finnish Finns, because Swedish and Finnish are 2 very distinctly different languages, not related at all.
Really? Okay.
Right. So Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, they're all related. We can understand each other fairly well.
Sure.
But Finnish it's related to Hungarian and Estonian, and it's a completely different language group.
Okay.
So so he's from there, and he was a conductor prodigy back in the early 90s. I think he was only around 20 years old when he took over as the chief conductor of the Radio Symphony in Stockholm. And he was there for quite a few years. Then he moved on to, LA after that. And he was with the LA Symphony for many years. And then eventually he he was actually talking about pulling back from conducting and focusing more on composing, because he's a composer-conductor.
Okay.
When suddenly he emerged on the scene, when everybody was wondering who's going to replace MTT, after his wonderful tenure of 25 years, I believe.
Yeah, he's been there a while. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and there was Esa-Pekka Salonen, and so we were all excited about that. And
So is he actually going to take over from MTT?
oh, he did already. He started.
Oh, he did already. Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I completely
Yeah.
missed that.
So this is why it's so sad, because MTT's major farewell concert and concerts, we had planned for 2 or 3 weeks of major musical events, June of 20. That was all canceled because of the lockdowns.
Right.
We're going to do a bunch of stuff. An opera, I forgot. I think it was Wagner, the Fliegende Holländer, the Flying Dutchman. Semi-staged, and then a number of other productions, and then ending with Mahler's 8th Symphony,
which is his piece. He that is his piece, right? Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, and so that all did not happen, and instead they did a wonderful tribute to him, online tribute. That it couldn't have been done better, I think, but still it was online instead of live. So then Esa-Pekka started in the fall of 2020.
Got it.
So it's been there for 1.5 years already.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So that was also sad for Esa-Pekka to start under such circumstances.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Being able to do just small productions with masks and all of that.
Wow.
But now it's better, of course. But they're required to get
to
those
show
songs.
papers. Yeah, yeah. My one MTT experience or moment was when I was driving up Franklin Street, like in the hills, towards the Pacific Heights, and I look in my rearview mirror, and he's in the passenger seat of a car right behind me. I'm like, oh, that's MTT. And we drove along for a few blocks, and then eventually I turned. But so that was my one moment. And then one time I was walking in front of the what used to be the modern art, the SF Museum of Modern Art, where the green room and I forget the War Memorial. Basically, I was walking near the War Memorial, and I walked by Herbert Blomstedt and his wife. But this was after he was the director of the symphony. So so rare San Francisco moments.
Yeah.
Do you keep in touch with Capella SF?
Oh yeah, wanted to
let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about them.
Do you do anything for them? Any work with them?
No, we put everything on ice, on hold for the time being. Of course, it was natural during the pandemic year, but now since the vaccine option and the vaccine passport system was introduced, potentially we could have opened up fall of 21. But of course, we didn't do it. I don't dare to travel anywhere, really. I don't want to get stuck anywhere because of my status.
Right.
So we decided, we spoke with the board to keep it on ice, to keep it on hold for. Keep it on ice. Is that a Swedish expression, perhaps?
Yeah,
it's something we know.
Yeah, we know it. We're familiar with it.
It's kind of gangster,
nice.
20s gangster talk. Keep them on ice, yeah.
It's like when I use allegories to the chorus in San Francisco and talk about curling, and they look, what is curling?
Well, speaking of curling, they just installed a big curling center here in Pittsburgh, just up the hill
really?
where we live. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. No, so we decided to not do anything. What was it, through November 21, and then we're going to assess the situation again. And we haven't really reassessed, but the situation is the same. So at the moment, we're just not active. I guess everybody's just hoping for things to really get back to normal or to something better than normal.
Wow.
What was the impetus for founding that organization?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's quite an interesting story, actually, because when I started at the symphony, before I came up with the idea, MTT beat me to it and suggested why not form an elite ensemble of there are 30 professionals, now 32, then it was 30 professionals in the symphony chorus and 120 volunteers. Why not make an elite group of a smaller group of the professionals and maybe some of the best volunteers, and to be able, as a vehicle, to perform some more challenging contemporary stuff and things like that. And I just had the same idea, and I was just on fire. That was a big part of why I felt so excited to take on the position in San Francisco. So we started planning for that already 2008-7, actually from when I started. And so I think it was 2009 that we were supposed to premiere. We had lined out 4 performances during the season of 2009 and 10 or 2008 and 9. I forgot which exact year it was. I think it was 2009 and 10. With so-called pre-concerts at 7 o'clock, when the main event would start at 8 o'clock, and we would sing for half an hour with some a cappella classics, the Bach motets that I mentioned before. I was asked to provide programs for 4 such events during 2009-10 season. So I was really excited about that. But then, if you remember, that's when the recession hit.
Right.
So all new projects at the symphony were canceled or put on ice. So it didn't happen that year. And we were waiting to see if perhaps next year, didn't happen then, and next year didn't happen then. So the years went by, and my then chorus manager suggested to me, why not start your own group outside of the symphony? Then you would have all the control and you're not dependent on, but that's too much administration required. I can help you, she said. And this was Elaine Robertson, wonderful person. So she helped me out with all the initial steps in regards to applying for a 501c3 and then getting a board formed and all of those initial steps. She has a brilliant mind for organization.
For that,
That's great.
yeah.
So we got started. Then she pulled out, but then I got some other wonderful people, among them our president, Koti Fengler, who's also a member of the Symphony Chorus and a volunteer singer, but she's our CEO of Capella SF, chair of board. So we got a flying start, and 2014 we made our debut. And of course, in retrospect, that was so much better. I mean, it would have been wonderful to have that at the symphony as well, but as Elaine suggested to me, now with that group, I had complete independence of what repertoire, what lengths of program, what singers to invite, etc.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's one thing I did love about San Francisco Bay Area was like all the different musical types of groups and performances. There were so many different organizations out there that met the interests of so many different people.
Yeah.
You know, for a while there, I don't remember when it ended or if it continued, but there was the Berkeley Festival that would go on every other year for the early music crowd.
Right.
And there were, all the different, early music groups, but then there was, Chanticleer, SF Gay Men's Chorus, there was your organization, and, so many other groups that were out there. It was fantastic for all kinds of music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I know. Yeah, very diverse, very alive musical scene. So for me, what was part of the rationale for that was that my background, I had a lot of a cappella background, and I was, of course, missing that a little bit being a symphony chorus director. I loved that part of the job, preparing the major works and all of that. And also as symphony choruses I was fortunate that MTT was so broad-minded in his musical taste that he suggested that we do a Palestrina motet as a precursor to whatever other orchestra work that he did. And at some point we did a contemporary a cappella piece before Mozart's Requiem, and we did Brahms' Warum ist das Licht, stuff like that, with the symphony chorus in Davies Hall on the major scene. On the big scene. So, but still, that was not all that much. But many symphony chorus don't get to do any a cappella music at all. So I was fortunate, but still, it was a little too little to keep me satisfied with my a cappella hunger. So that's why I wanted that group, Capella SF.
That's fantastic. Now, I was listening to a video or reading. There was you received an award, and we saw the video about that award, and they were talking about how you found a way to make sure that all the musicians, the singers, they're all professionals, that they got paid for their time. And I thought that was a very cool thing that you were able to work that out with that organization.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a tough thing to do, or did you have a good funding source to help with that?
Right. Yeah. Well, we that's what we set out to be, a professional choir, and then professional in regards to paying your choristers. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we as I mentioned, I had a wonderful board that helped out with funding with looking for funds. So I was very fortunate that we were able to get funding, and among the people who funded us were Barbara Osher with the Pro Suecia Foundation in San Francisco. So she helped out a lot, and but we got from other sources as well, and so things were moving well, and we still have money in our budget for whatever productions when and if I come back.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, yeah. Sorry to get into the mundane of things, but I'm always curious about, how organizations are able to continue. It sounds like you had a very strong board, and that's really cool.
Yeah, a wonderful board, really.
Yeah, because the arts, we always suffer.
Yeah.
Especially some of the smaller groups. So so that's very cool. So what are so you mentioned, this is something that a goal that you'd like to get back to them. What other things are you looking at in the immediate for you and
I have a re-invitation to Seraphic Fire in Florida, January of 23. And then I'm just hoping that things will return to normal. Right now, it's not normal here, and there are many people like I who do our best to fight against the new normal, being that everybody's required to show their papers, because then we'll be in trouble. So meanwhile, I guess I did sacrifice. I was supposed to conduct a Bach Christmas oratorio in December, but I declined to do that when they introduced the option of having vaccine passport events. And even though I was not required to show a passport, I could just do the testing. I didn't want to participate in events where people like me could not sit out in the hall and listen.
Right.
So
that's amazing. Well, that is, that in and of itself, Ragnar, is why Ragnar. I'm so sorry. My name. I have this. I have this problem with names. This is why we wanted to talk to you, because your commitment to this is something that we really admire, and we're glad that you are standing up and taking a stand on these things. All of us need to take these small stands, and in order to get to that place where we feel like we'll be back to normal.
Right. Has anybody else that you know of, whether it's in San Francisco or in Sweden where you are, have they also taken a stand like you have? I mean, or do you just feel like you're kind of a lone wolf out there?
No. On the contrary, there are quite a few. I guess we're still a minority, of course. And well, here's how I feel about it. Before the pandemic, I felt rather lonely, being aware of the dangers of the increasing EMF exposure that we have in society today. The 5G rollout, the GMO takeover, the glyphosate issue, the fluoridation issue, lots of things that I started to realize when I was looking outside of mainstream media. As I mentioned, that I started around 2008. But it was kind of a lonely, I felt lonely then. But when the pandemic broke out, suddenly there were so many of us, so many people started waking up to see what is going on here, really, asking questions. So,
and finding each other as a result.
Exactly. So I know a lot of people like me here in Sweden.
Good.
And we keep in touch and encourage each other. And of course, we're still a minority. I'm not sure if you're aware of Professor Matthias Desmet from Belgium.
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, in fact, we were thinking about asking him if he wants to.
He's very popular.
He's very popular, so I don't know if we're going to get him.
I think he was popular before, but especially since his name was mentioned in the Joe Rogan interview with, who was it? Peter McCullough. No, that was Robert
with Malone. Yeah.
Right.
He mentioned Desmet, so his mass formation idea sort of came to the fore. So according to him, there are 30% that completely follow an agenda when things like this happen in societies. About 30, right? And 40% that are in the middle and don't know exactly what foot to stand on. They don't speak out, but they're inwardly a bit hesitant. And then there are people like us, I guess, and 20 to 30%. So that makes sense to me, and I'm kind of hopeful, because if one looks into the situation, at least this is how I look at it, that if you really look into where things are going, or unless we stop them, there are only two outcomes from the situation that we're in. So therefore, we just need to resist.
Right. And we often talk about that 40% as being the group of people that are, don't waste your time on that 10% that are, or sorry, the 30% that are completely bought in.
Right.
Talk to those people who are not really sure. And,
Right.
if you can bring them over to, a decision or a side, as it were, you will reach that tipping point. Because, if you get 10 to 20% of that group of people over on one side or the other, then, that's where it will go,
Right.
that
Right.
tipping point. But, it takes, little chips away. We've been talking about how, yes, this is a war against humanity, but we're only going to win by small battles, and
Right.
we're going to win and lose battles. But, if we take it one step at a time, and one stance at a time, we will, find our way to that place that we want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Well,
It's been over an hour.
It's been over an hour. It always goes fast. But we are so happy that you were able to join us today.
Yes.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wonderful to meet you and hear your story and clear some things up about what's going on in Sweden and about, the circumstances that put you in that place where you could no longer be in San Francisco, which was really sad for us. So it was really great to talk to you and learn your story. Anything else that you want to say?
No. I
Maybe
think
I
that's
should just add, because I missed the opportunity when we were touching up on that subject, that the vaccine passport system, it's very hard because of very strong Swedish laws to get to people with steady employment, people who are employed. You can't mandate a medication on employed people by Swedish law. So therefore, knock on wood, they're doing what they can to circumvent those
Okay.
strong laws. But so far, I'm kind of safe in my
Yeah.
church.
yeah.
That's
Well,
good.
that's good. I'm
That's
glad to hear
really
that.
great. I wish we could go there and hear you.
Yeah,
and
I know.
watch you play.
We're just as hesitant to travel as well because of
Yeah.
the very things that you're talking about.
Yeah, we're pretty hesitant to travel. And where we live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, things are okay. We can't go to concerts, but we can still go to maybe a small club and see a small little band without having to wear a mask or show a passport or anything like that.
We can go to restaurants.
We could still go to restaurants and coffee shops. We can't go to museums or bigger concerts or
even like more official club dates.
Official clubs, but so we're hoping that little cities like the one we live in will hold the line, and keep pushing it back, pushing back.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're gonna wrap up. We'll put you in the green room, but we'll come back after we finish the show and talk more then.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh.
Okay.
So
that was Ragnar Bohlin.
Mhm.
You guys look him up. Go listen to some of the things that he has done in the past, and we might actually incorporate that.
I put his website in the show notes, as well as the link to that video that we watched earlier today, so you can see the full 8-minute video. It's quite breathtaking. It's a beautiful experience, even on video.
Is,
yeah,
really.
Yeah. I think even better in some ways on video, because you can see the maestro's face and his body language and how he relates to the chorus, and so it's a beautiful thing. So we've got lots of shows coming up. We're going to post all all our guests for the second season of Pullquote. So we hope you will join us for those programs as well. Anything else?
No, just really, really, really honored and happy that Ragnar agreed to come on and talk to us. I just, I feel like there's so much more that we could say,
cover and talk to,
we could go into some really deep conversations, but we have to keep it to an hour. So,
yeah. So, all right.
Well,
thanks. And we'll see you again next time for another edition of Pullquote.
Bye. Thank you.
Pullquote is made possible by our patrons and supporters. You can help us continue to do the work that we do by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Book of Hours. Join Rockfin or leave us a tip at rockfin.com/Book of Hours. Or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/Book of Hours. Thank you. Okay, and we're back.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank